Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum friends. Welcome back to another episode of Football Gupshup. Friends, if you could please subscribe to this channel as well as press the bell button icon so you can receive the notifications for the latest episodes. Friends, if you could also share this channel with your family and friends on your various social media platforms, it would be really helpful to grow this channel. So friends, let's start today's episode. We're going to be speaking about Everton. As you've seen the thumbnail, we're going to be speaking about what has happened in the previous days, what's currently going on right now. Is Rafael Benitez's job, is it kind of secure, or is he in danger of losing it? What has happened under this new ownership? How is Everton going to change this current issue that they have spent so much money on players, but they haven't been able to turn themselves into a real force? They haven't been able to come into top four. They haven't been able to really challenge the elite six clubs. And what's made them basically, they have put so much money in this team and still they're nowhere able to get close to those six clubs. So we're going to speak about Everton. What I'm going to do is I'm going to speak about Everton in terms of a whole, meaning that we're going to go a little bit back before this ownership. We're going to see where Everton were and how did they do while they were without this ownership. And we're going to start speaking about Everton problems in between and basically when the new ownership took over. And we're going to speak about what kind of issues did they had, what kind of players they were targeting, and what kind of players they got, and how has that resulted in. Is it a kind of a bad example for how should the football club should be run? And we're going to speak about what can they do in order to eradicate those problems. So let's start. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to speak about Everton. You can see David Moyes. David Moyes was the manager of Everton. He's currently the manager of West Ham. But David Moyes was the one who turned Everton into a real Premiership force. Everton were really a good team under his stewardship. And we're going to start from the season 2010 and 2011. You could see the table. Everton, they used to kind of, they were one of the outsiders. They were trying to hunt those top six places, more importantly, the top four positions. But they were never able to because always the excuse used to come in that they didn't have that much amount of money in which they could kind of challenge those top six teams. So you could see the result in 2010-11, they were 7th. Similarly, in the season following, they were again 7th. And they were just among the lines of between the points of 54 and 56. Then the season after, they kind of took over from Liverpool. And they got 63 points, but they still didn't, they weren't able to get into top four. Knowingly, Sir Alex Ferguson that season he announced his retirement, and then he asked the Manchester United board to elect him as the next Manchester United manager, to which he availed the position and he got the United job, and then he left Everton. And afterwards, Everton, they recruited Martinez, and under Martinez they did played well and they achieved the 5th position. They scored they attained 72 points, but they still weren't able to get into top 4. And after that season, they didn't perform that well, and they came to the 11th position. And the season after, they didn't do good as well. They only managed to get 47 points. And later, in that mid-season, it was announced that Moshiri will be taking over Everton. He would be buying Everton, and Bill Kenwright would be selling his shares. And that's what happened. Moshiri took over, and Moshiri apparently he bought the shares from Kenwright, and then he became the new Everton chairman. And after that, he brought in a new manager, Ronald Koeman, who joined Everton. As well as Koeman, they also appointed Steve Walsh from Leicester. He was the new director of football for Everton. He was supposed to target players, hunt players for Ronald Koeman so that they could go on and build a new successful team. And that's what they did. They started buying players, and the players that they bought were Yannick Bolasie from Crystal Palace. They paid 25 million. and then they paid 20 million for Morgan Schneiderlin from Manchester United. And as everybody remembers, Schneiderlin wasn't doing good for Manchester United. He was bought under Van Gaal, but he wasn't doing good in United team. But he was then bought by Everton, which was quite astonishing at that time. But after that, they also went in to buy Ashley Williams from Swansea. They also bought Lookman from Charlton, and they also bought Gui from Aston Villa. Later, Gui was basically sold to PSG for 30 million on a profit. And looking at these names, you could say that they were building some kind of, you could say, challenging for top 4, but it didn't end up in that manner. Then they also signed Dominic Calvert-Lewin from Sheffield United, which seems to me that it was a very good business. Looking at right now, he's one of them, you could say, very important players, and he's one of the talisman who apparently scores a lot of goals. They also went on to sign a goalkeeper in Stecklenburg, and apparently he didn't do good in his time at Everton. They also went to sign Enner Valencia from West Ham on loan, but he didn't do good as well. Under Koeman, they managed to get to 7th position. They got 61 points, but they weren't able to get in top 4. And they backed him up again in the summer. And in that summer, they went after Sigurdsson from Swansea. They paid 40 million for him. And since then, Sigurdsson hasn't been able to produce that much of good performances. And after him, they went to buy Michael Keane. Michael Keane has turned out to be a very slow project. Apparently, he wasn't doing good in the beginning, but he has become one of the regular starters right now for Everton. They also went on to sign Jordan Pickford from Sunderland. Pickford has turned himself into a very good goalkeeper for Everton, but most importantly for England. And he still has the gloves for his national team right now. After that, they went on to sign another midfielder in the name of Klaassen from Ajax. They paid 23.6 million for him, but he didn't do good, and you could say that he was another failure in signing. After him, they also signed Vlasic, and he didn't do that much good. Then they also signed Onikuru. You could say that he was another miss. And then they signed Sandro for 5.2 million, but he didn't do good as well. So looking at these 3-4 names, you can understand that apparently Everton, they were apparently using a scattergun approach. They went into the transfer market, they looked for names, and they couldn't find which could suit their kind of style of play, and apparently they didn't do good. And after that, they also went on to sign another names such as Wayne Rooney. He was signed as a free transfer from Manchester United, and Mangala, he was signed as a loan signing. Then they also signed Toussaint from Besiktas. They paid 27.5 million. He was another miss. You could say that there was no clear policy in terms of what kind of players they wanted and what kind of players they were getting, and that resulted in pretty bad performance. And Ronald Koeman had to lose his job. And then came in Sam Allardyce. Sam Allardyce, he finished the season, and Everton finished at 8th position, and they got 49 points. And after that, the coming summer, they kind of let go of Walsh, and he was quietly blamed for spending about 150 million on new players, and they were found in danger of relegation. And he also, you could say, he was blamed for so many signings. But on the other hand, it was reported that he also recommended the Hull duo, Andy Robertson and Harry Maguire, for combine of 20 million pounds. He also recommended Erling Haaland for 4 million, but Everton apparently rejected the trio, and whose values were sold years later. So he was replaced by Marcel Brands. Marcel Brands came from PSV, and he was hired as a new director of football. He basically he was the next hot name in the terms of director of football. And so was Sam Allardyce. He was also shown the door. They weren't looking for Sam Allardyce as their manager. And the changes were made. And they brought in Marco Silva as the new manager. Marco Silva, as soon as he came in, there were quite new names which were basically attached to him, such as Richarlison. He was signed from Watford for 35 million. Then they also brought in Yerry Mina and Lucas Digne from Barcelona. He was signed for 18 million. It seemed to be a pretty good sounded transfer window. They also went in to sign Andre Gomez on loan from Barcelona then. And they also signed Kurt Zouma for loan from Chelsea. But still Marco Silva wasn't able to get Everton to those heights. And Everton again attained 8th position with 54 points. Then the coming summer they signed Alex Iwobi from Arsenal for 27 million. They also signed Moise Kean for 25 million from Juventus. He didn't do good. He was back on loan to Juventus. Then they also bought a midfielder called Bamin from Mainz for 22 million. He still hasn't been able to produce and he has been injured and the jury is still out for him. Fabian Delph was signed from Manchester City as a veteran, but he didn't do good as well. Then there was another right back signing in Djibril Sidibe, and he didn't do good as well. And you could say that all these names which Everton acquired were of sound reputation, but they weren't able to produce good as soon as they joined Everton. Perhaps maybe it's due to the fault of coaching, or perhaps they weren't looked thoroughly and what they required and what they wanted and what they had eventually in the end, and it turned out to be a pretty big mess because now they have so many names by this time that you could say that there's no clear strategy or clear vision from the club. Moving on forward, they apparently asked Duncan Ferguson to hold the ship for a month, and he did. After a month, they appointed Carlo Ancelotti as the new manager. Carlo Ancelotti, as soon as he came in, he finished the season off in 12th position. Everton had 49 points, and it seems that after the new era, this was the lowest that Everton could have gone. But after recruiting an elite manager such as Carlo Ancelotti, they were looking that maybe the things would be turning and they could enter into the frame for the top four, not in one season, perhaps in 2 seasons. And that's what they did by at least targeting good players. They acquired Allen from Napoli. They signed him for 21.7 million. He was a big hit. He did good. As well as they signed Ben Godfrey from Norwich, who has turned out to be a pretty good defender. He's a pretty good player. And they also went on to sign Doucouré from Watford. And these trio, they did pretty good in terms of coming to Everton, and they went straight off and they hit it off properly, and they done pretty good since then. They also signed James Rodriguez, but he hasn't been able to produce goods since 2014 World Cup, and he has been moved to Qatar. He's playing for Al Rayyan. And then there were names such as Joshua King, Robin Olsen, and Konku, which weren't as much as promising. And what happened was the season ended and Everton finished in 10th position and they had only 59 points. After that, Ancelotti left for Real Madrid, and then came in Rafael Benitez. Benitez, as soon as he came in, there was a quite storm. There was quite angry reaction from the fans because he was the ex-Liverpool manager and he had said pretty bad things about Everton as a football club. What he meant was that he called them a small-minded club, a small club, and that's what it has been used, that Benitez is not one of the Everton favourites, and that's what has been said. And as far as going forward, what happened was they backed Rafael Benitez in the transfer window. They signed Demarai Gray from Bayer Leverkusen, and he seems to be kind of a hit. And going forward, they also signed Andros Townsend. They also signed Asmir Begovic, Solomon Rondon, Andy Lonergan, and they've signed these players. Everton fans, they seem to be pretty happy with Demarai Gray, Andrew Townsend, but they're not happy of what the club has done since last 4 to 5 years. The players that they have bought hasn't resulted good, because this season they are in 14th position and they're not doing good at the moment. And this seems to have turned all the Everton fans against the board, the owner, the board of directors, as well as the supporting director, as well as Rafael Benitez. And now news have started to come in that Rafael Benitez might have some games to save his job, and Wayne Rooney has been talked to, and we could see Wayne Rooney turning up as an Everton manager, which would be quite astonishing. He was the young player from the Everton academy, and he would be joining them back as a manager, which would really mean to Rooney a lot. And basically what has happened is that Everton haven't been able to think this through. They haven't been able to basically put their strategies correct. They haven't put their vision in effect in terms of practicality. They did acquire some good players. They did acquire some proper good players, but they didn't do it that well. What they should have done was that they should have at least think this through. They shouldn't have spent money straight right away, because if you choose that path, it's not comes with certainty. It doesn't come with assurity that you will achieve success. You need to think it through. You need to be very cautious. You need to be very patient in order to attain those results, because success doesn't come overnight. It doesn't mean that if you have money you would be successful straight away. So in aspect of those, what Marcel Brands and what Steve Walsh did was basically, what I think is that they were pressurized. They were quite pressurized into attaining those results, into attaining those top 4 positions, which resulted in scattergun approach. And Everton targeting players such as Calvert-Lewin, Godfrey, they went and they looked for Iwobi, and they went out and they looked for players such as Sigurdsson and those kind of players. Now, you can target those kind of players, but you shouldn't be always targeting those kind of big names, because it doesn't mean, because if you spend that much amount of money, like if Sigurdsson costs you £40 million and he doesn't do good, then the fall comes back on you. And if you spend 30 million on Iwobi, who wasn't a very good winger in Arsenal, and if he doesn't do good in Everton, then definitely the criticism is going to come back on you. And I think that's what happened with Marcel Brands. He had to pay the price for it, and he had to lose his job. And this is what resulted in uncertainty, because whoever the next man comes in, they'll have to sell first, because they're not doing good on FFP. They have to sell in order to do business in future. They cannot go out and spend big, because if they do, they'll get penalized by the authorities on spending stupid money. And now they want to spend more money. Even if they want to do it wisely, they will not get this kind of chance, because they'll have to sell in order to buy. So we could see the likes of Richarlison, or we could see the likes of Calvert-Lewin leaving the club, which will be pretty bad, because those two should be the big names which Everton should keep on hold to, as well as Godfrey. But it seems that it won't be, and they will have to sell those 2 big players. This is the thing which all the clubs should learn, that if you get money, you shouldn't go for scattergun approach. You need to have patience. You need to build up slowly. You need to understand that it will take years. It won't take 3 or 4 transfer windows. It might take you 5 to 10 windows. It might take you 10 to 15 windows. But eventually you'll get there. Gradually you'll get there. You're not going to get there overnight. You'll have to put in effort by effort, and then you will get there. So that's the lesson that every club should learn. We could see from Everton that they had that money and they have wasted on mediocre players. They have spent that much money on players which were just promise, not in substance, and that has turned the whole fan base pretty sour. Now, looking at Newcastle, because they got new owners now, they'll be in the running too. So if Everton fans will be looking at Newcastle, spending the money wisely, and if they're in the same market where they're targeting the same kind of players, and if Newcastle get those better players ahead of them, it will turn very sour. So what Everton need to do is they need to first of all dictate out a policy. The policy shouldn't be for the next 2 or 3 years. The policy should be for next 5 to 10 years, maybe 10 to 15 years. And once they put in that policy, then they could go on to progress and achieving those results. And if they do that, they could truly turn out to be a pretty sound force, because there is no guarantee that all the big 6 teams will be in a similar fashion or will be in the similar manner in coming future. So if Everton show some patience, especially the board, they could do that. They could rectify the mistakes which they've done, and we could see Everton turning into be a very good team, and especially into a very good force, and they could go in Europe and they can make a name for themselves. So they need to be patient in that respect. They need to focus on their academy. They need to target those players which are not big names, which are not even premiership names. They need to be patient in their policy, and if they do that, then they will achieve those. Now, there is this book called Soccernomics. I'm sure that everybody would have heard about this book. It's been written by Simon Cooper and Stefan Zimanski. Apparently, they've written this book, and in that book there is a chapter which says, "Gentlemen prefer blondes, how to avoid silly mistakes in the transfer market." In the chapter, they have addressed that apparently what do clubs do? Clubs essentially think that if you spend money, you're going to get good players, and that will turn out to be pretty good in the long term. But actually, it's not that, because they've given out so many examples. And if you read that chapter, you would understand the examples they've given definitely proves your point that you never win if you spend money, especially if you spend a lot of money and in thinking that you will attain quality. You do attain quality, but it never turns out to be in that manner. They have given some solution in what should the clubs do, and they've written in 12 points. They've said that a new manager wastes money on transfers, don't let them. Basically, when the new manager comes in, they always want to spend money on transfers. Don't let him. Use the wisdom of crowd. What they mean to say is, if the fans are saying that don't do this and do that, you should always listen to them. If you do not always listen to them, but do sometimes listen to them, perhaps there are some factors, if you would have a note on them, you might see some wisdom in it. And never ever target player who are performing in World Cups or European Championship, because they're overvalued. Ignore them. Certain nationalities are overvalued. You could understand that, for example, if you're a Dutch player, and if you're really not good, and you still will have some value in the market, and sometimes if you're a Dutch player or you're a Brazilian player, there'll be always some teams chasing you because of your nationality. Then the older players they are always overvalued. Centre forwards are overvalued. Goalkeepers are undervalued. Gentlemen prefer blondes. Identify and abandon side-based prejudices. Basically, you shouldn't kind of categorize someone that because they are so and so. Basically, they give an example of Moneyball of Billy Bean in Oakland A, that apparently when you overlook some players but they are good in something, doesn't mean that they're bad in everything. Sometimes they're good in something which turns out to be pretty fruitful. The best time to buy a player is when he's in his early 20s. The best time to buy a player is when they're in their 20s and they haven't made their name and they want to make a name, and that's when you should get them, because the motivation is there. Sell any player when another club offers more than he is worth. You should always sell a player if you've seen that a club has come in and they want your player and they're offering more than he's worth. You should always sell at that moment. Replace your best players even before you sell them. What you should do is, if you have a good player, if you have a player which you think is unreplaceable, replace them before you sell them. Because once you do that, if that person leaves the club, then who do you have? So you need to have a replacement. Buy players with personal problems. and then help them deal with their problems. Basically, what they're trying to say is you always should be accommodating your players. You should be always there for them as a club, and you should always help your players. And in the 12th point, what they've said is that help your players relocate. You should always help your players relocate, because whenever the new player comes in from new country or from new culture, they take time to embed in your club, they take time to embed in your culture, they take time to embed in your country. So you should always help them to relocate. So that's what they've said, and that's what the 12 points they focus upon if you want to do right in transfer market. I think this is a lesson for Everton as well, that's what they should do. So folks, that's it for this episode. I hope you liked it. I hope you like the points which I raised. I hope you like what I've said on this matter. Hopefully we'll see Everton doing good in the coming years, and we'll be talking about Everton soon. If Rafael Benitez doesn't do good, we might see him go, and we might see Wayne Rooney joining in. That'll be something to see. So anyway folks, thank you for watching this episode. Please subscribe to this channel, as well as please tell your family and friends about this channel. It would be really helpful to grow this channel. And please give in your comments if you like the episode, or if you don't, if you wanted to add anything, or if there's any suggestion for the next video I should do. So please do tune in for the next one. Thank you for watching Football Gupshup. See ya.